Before most people are even awake, it's already happening. No press conference, no news cameras, not even a hint on the evening reports. Somewhere inside the federal system, an inmate is being pulled from their cell long before sunrise. They're told to grab what little property they're allowed. Their name is already moved through layers of paperwork, approvals, and security reviews they'll never see. Outside, a transport team is waiting, not for a routine prison transfer, but for one of the most tightly controlled journeys in the entire United States. Because this trip doesn't end at a normal penitentiary. It ends at a place judges, journalists, and former officials have all described as the most secure prison in America, ADX Florence, the Alcatraz of Iraqis. Tonight, we're not telling rumors. We're following the real process. Who decides an inmate should go there? How the transfer is approved? Why the date is kept secret? And what actually happens, step by step, on the journey into America's harshest Supermax. This is how inmates are transferred to ADX Florence, inside America's most secure prison move. Before we dive in, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe to HFD Achieve Crimes. Every bit of support helps us reveal the hidden truths behind the world's prisons and crime documentaries. Now, let's go inside. Before we can follow the journey itself, we need to understand why transfers to ADX Florence stand apart from every other movement in the federal system. The Bureau of Prisons manages more than 120 facilities across the country, each with its own security level and mission. Most inmate transfers, even for those considered high security, move through predictable channels, buses, vans, or the U.S. Marshals Air Fleet known as JPATS. It is a routine system built for efficiency. But ADX Florence is not part of that routine. ADX was built for a very specific population, inmates whose behavior, influence, or escape history has proven too difficult for any other prison to manage. According to publicly documented BOP policy and decades of reporting, ADX houses inmates who pose ongoing threats of violence, have attempted escapes, have assaulted staff or others behind bars, or have significant gang or extremist connections. Some inmates arrive after coordinating crimes from within previous prisons, others because they have killed while incarcerated. The common thread is the level of risk, a level that demands extraordinary security measures. This is the first reason ADX transfers are unique. The inmates selected for it represent the highest risk cases in federal custody. They're not sent there casually. Every transfer is the result of months, sometimes years, of documented behavior, incident reports, and internal reviews. The second reason is that the transfer itself can create additional security risks. Inmates bound for ADX often maintain influence, have outside criminal networks, or have attempted escape. Moving them through public highways, airports, or holding facilities requires increased staff ratios, specialized restraints, and coordination between the Bureau of Prisons and the U.S. Marshal Service. There are documented cases where transfers were adjusted or delayed because intelligence suggested possible interference. For this reason, ADX-bound movements are treated as high-stakes operations. The third reason is capacity. ADX houses only about 300 to 400 inmates, far fewer than most federal prisons, many of which hold well over 1,000. Every space inside ADX is tightly controlled and purposefully limited. A single incoming inmate can affect housing placements, psychological services, and security planning. That means no one is sent to ADX without a formal, multi-stage review process ensuring that the transfer is justified and that a suitable cell is available. Together, these factors explain why ADX transfers cannot follow ordinary procedures. The inmates are different, the security concerns are different, and the destination itself demands precision. Before the journey begins, before the restraints, the secret timing, the transport vehicles, the system must first determine that an inmate truly meets the criteria for the most secure federal prison in the United States. The decision to send an inmate to ADX Florence is not made lightly, and it is never made by a single person. Unlike routine transfers, which can be approved by local staff or regional offices, an ADX designation passes through multiple layers of the Bureau of Prisons before anyone is moved. Each layer examines the inmate's history, behavior, and risk level with extraordinary detail. It begins at the facility where the inmate is already housed. A warden or regional director submits the first referral, typically when the inmate's behavior can no longer be safely managed in their current institution. This could be the result of violent assaults on staff, homicides behind bars, major escape attempts, repeated involvement in gang-directed activity, or ongoing criminal coordination from within the prison. These triggers are supported by publicly available BOP policy and by documented cases across the federal system. The referral is not a simple note. In other federal contexts where procedures are visible, similar packets contain incident reports, disciplinary records, psychological evaluations, security assessments, and input from investigative staff and correctional officers. While the exact ADX referral packet is not publicly released, credible sources and testimony indicate it follows a similarly structured format. Once submitted, the referral moves to the Designation and Sentence Computation Center, DSCC, in Texas. This central office decides where every federal inmate should be housed, and ADX candidates receive an especially detailed review. The DSCC examines the inmate's entire background, medical needs, sentence length, gang affiliations, escape risk, misconduct history, and whether the individual meets the strict criteria for ADX. Court filings and former BOP statements confirm the DSCC's role as the critical decision point for security classification. From there, the process often involves consultation with leadership at ADX Florence. Because space at ADX is limited and every unit has a specific purpose, general population ranges, control units, special administrative measures units, the prison must confirm that it can house the inmate safely. While not every detail of this consultation is public, it is consistent with standard BOP practices for handling high-security placements and has been referenced in several federal cases involving ADX transfers. Finally, for the most dangerous or influential inmates, final approval rests with the BOP Central Office in Washington, D.C. Reporting from reputable journalists and information revealed in civil litigation both describe ADX approval as one of the most difficult authorizations to obtain in the entire system. Only a small number of inmates ever meet the conditions required for the highest security facility in the United States. Once the approval is granted, the inmate is officially designated for ADX. But at this stage, the inmate often still does not know. Transfers of this level require secrecy, coordination, and timing, all controlled at the administrative level. What follows is the quiet, unannounced preparation for one of the most secure transport operations the federal government conducts. Once an inmate is approved for ADX Florence, the decision moves into its most controlled phase, the preparation for transfer. And unlike almost every other movement in the federal system, this stage is surrounded by deliberate secrecy. The date, the time, and even the method of transport are kept hidden, not only from the public, but often from the inmate themselves until the very last moment. This secrecy exists for a reason. Many of the inmates designated for ADX have attempted escapes in the past or have documented connections to outside criminal networks. Others have incited violence at previous facilities or have shown the ability to influence groups from inside their cells. For inmates like these, even a whisper of a transfer date can become a security risk. Avoiding that risk means controlling information with extreme precision. So, the Bureau of Prisons follows a strict protocol. The inmate is not told in advance. The transfer date is not posted, not announced, and not hinted at. Staff involved in the operation are usually informed only shortly before it happens, and some details are shared on a need-to-know basis. This approach is consistent with BOP policy for high-risk inmate movements and with statements from former correctional officers interviewed by reputable news outlets. When the day finally arrives, everything begins early, often before sunrise. Correctional staff quietly alert the inmate that they are being moved. There is no time given to prepare mentally or physically. The inmate gathers only the few items they're allowed to bring: legal documents, identification materials, and limited personal property. ADX has strict property rules. so most items will be mailed separately or reissued after arrival. The escort team is already positioned. Depending on the facility, this may include members of a Special Operations Response Team, SORT, highly trained officers who specialize in high-risk movements. While the specific use of SORT teams varies between institutions and is not always publicly confirmed for ADX transfers, their role in major inmate transports is well documented. Restraints are applied immediately. These are standard federal high-security transport procedures. Handcuffs, waist chains, leg restraints, and sometimes black box covers to limit wrist movement. Officers maintain close formation as they move the inmate through secure corridors. Every step is controlled. Every movement is monitored. Even at this stage, the staff still do not verbally confirm the final destination. The inmate may suspect it, but official confirmation rarely happens until the transport chain is already in motion. The transfer begins quietly. No announcements are made to the rest of the prison. There are no visible signals that something unusual is happening. Only a few staff members understand the significance of what is unfolding. For the inmate, this marks the moment where ordinary federal custody ends, and the journey toward America's most secure prison truly begins. What awaits next is the Federal Transfer Network, a complex, hidden relay system designed to move inmates across the country with minimal visibility and maximum control. Contrary to what many people imagine, inmates destined for ADX Florence are almost never taken there directly. Instead, they enter a hidden pipeline within the federal system, a network of transfer hubs designed to quietly move prisoners across the country. These facilities act like secure relay points, where inmates are processed, regrouped, and prepared for long-distance travel. The most well-known of these hubs is FDC Oklahoma City, the primary transfer center for the Bureau of Prisons. With its proximity to major flight routes and its connection to JPATS aircraft, it serves as the central node for thousands of federal inmate movements each year. For many ADX-bound inmates, Oklahoma City is the first major stop after leaving their original facility. Other transfer centers play supporting roles, such as FDC Atlanta on the southeastern routes, and specialized units inside USP Leavenworth or USP Terre Haute, which have historically been used as temporary holding points. The U.S. Marshals Service also operates regional hubs that coordinate JPATS flights, though flight schedules and passenger details remain classified for security reasons. Once inside a transfer center, the inmate enters a temporary, highly controlled environment. Conditions vary, but many centers are known to house large populations in limited space. These facilities are not built for long-term stays. They are built for movement. Inmates are typically held in restrictive units, with little property, minimal privileges, and extremely limited contact with staff or other prisoners. The priority is efficiency and security, not comfort. The waiting period is unpredictable. Some inmates remain only a few days, while others spend weeks inside the transfer system. The length depends on factors like security clearances, available flights, administrative processing, and bed space coordination at ADX. During this time, the inmate often still does not know their final destination. Even if they suspect they are being sent to Colorado, staff rarely confirm details, reinforcing the secrecy surrounding ADX-bound movements. For ADX candidates, the transfer centers serve another purpose, transitioning from ordinary federal movement to the highest level of security transport. Officers monitor behavior, update paperwork, re-verify identity, and ensure restraints and escort procedures meet the standards required for high-risk inmates. These steps are consistent with Department of Justice reports describing federal transport protocols. Inside these centers, inmates live with uncertainty. The facilities are crowded, schedules are unpredictable, and movement is tightly restricted. Every day feels like preparation for something larger, because it is. When the call finally comes, usually early in the morning once again, the inmate is removed from their holding cell, placed in full restraints, and escorted through a new set of secure corridors toward the next stage of the journey. What follows is the most controlled and least visible part of the process: boarding a JPATS aircraft, often referred to in media as the federal system's Con Air. Once an ADX-bound inmate has waited out the transfer center holding period, the next stage of the journey begins, and it is one of the most tightly controlled movements in the entire federal system. For long-distance travel, the Bureau of Prisons relies on the U.S. Marshal Service and their specialized air fleet known as JPATS, the Justice Prisoner and Alien Transportation System. Media sometimes calls it Con Air, but its actual purpose is far more structured than the nickname suggests. JPATS flights operate out of secure hubs across the country, but the system keeps nearly everything confidential. Flight schedules are not public. Passenger lists are classified. Routing decisions are handled internally. Details about aircraft security are restricted. This secrecy exists because the flights routinely transport high-risk inmates, including those with escape attempts, gang connections, or ongoing criminal influence. ADX-bound inmates have appeared on JPATS flights in several documented, high-profile cases, but the Marshal Service never confirms individual transfers. The boarding process begins early in the morning. Officers escort the inmate from their holding cell in full restraints. These are standard for high-security transport. Handcuffs, waist chains, leg restraints, and in some cases, black box covers that restrict wrist movement. The escort team moves in tight formation, following slow, deliberate steps toward the transport area. Every movement is documented. Nothing is improvised. Before any inmate is allowed onto a JPATS aircraft, they undergo a pre-boarding search. This includes a visual check, a physical pat-down, metal detector scans when available, and a full inspection of authorized property. Officers confirm identification and verify that all restraints are correctly applied. These procedures mirror what has been described in DOJ Inspector General reports covering federal prisoner movement. The aircraft itself looks similar to a commercial plane on the outside, but the inside is adapted for security. Multiple reputable sources confirm general practices. High-risk inmates sit in designated rows. Empty seats or officer positions may separate them from others. Restraints remain in place for the entire flight. Officers are posted throughout the cabin. The cockpit stays locked. Doors are monitored at all times. Most passengers on JPATS flights are unrelated to ADX transfers. Inmates traveling for trials, hearings, medical trips, or ordinary prison moves. But special precautions apply to those heading to the nation's highest security facility. During the flight, movement is non-existent. There are no conversations with staff, no ability to stand or adjust seating. Meals, when provided, are sealed, transport-safe portions designed to be eaten while restrained. The environment is quiet, controlled, and intentionally uneventful. The goal is not comfort. It is secure, efficient transit. Regardless of where the flight originates, many ADX-bound inmates eventually end up touching down at Denver International Airport or Colorado Springs Airport. From here, the journey shifts once again from federal air transport to a secure ground convoy that will carry the inmate into the remote high desert of Florence, Colorado. The next phase is the final approach to the most secure prison in the United States. After the JPATS flight touches down, the journey enters its most revealing stage, the transition from air transport to the remote, heavily secure terrain surrounding Florence, Colorado. This part of the transfer is rarely documented publicly, but enough high-profile cases and official statements exist to outline how the final leg works. Most ADX-bound inmates land either at Denver International Airport or Colorado Springs Airport, two locations frequently referenced in reporting on federal high-security movements. There are no public announcements, no visible security displays, and no indication that anything unusual is happening among the thousands of daily passengers moving through the terminals. The transfer is designed to blend into ordinary activity because visibility can create risk. Once the aircraft is secured, officers escort the inmate down the steps or through a restricted access gate. They remain fully restrained, surrounded by staff trained in high-security transport. The escort team may include deputies from the U.S. Marshal Service or Bureau of Prisons personnel, depending on how the route was coordinated. Local law enforcement does not typically participate in these movements, a detail confirmed through multiple documented cases. Outside, a ground convoy waits. The vehicles used are standard federal transport vans, unmarked, reinforced, and built for security rather than appearance. These vehicles are deliberately low profile. Their purpose is to move without drawing attention. In certain high-profile transfers reported in the media, additional follow vehicles have been noted, though the exact configuration remains classified for operational safety. The drive from Denver to the Florence complex takes roughly 2 hours, from Colorado Springs, about 1 hour. The route passes through long stretches of open highway and sparsely populated terrain. These features, often highlighted by journalists covering ADX, provide natural advantages: wide visibility, limited side roads, and few places where a convoy could be intercepted or obstructed. While these environmental factors aren't official policy, they contribute to the inherent security of the region. Inside the transport van, conditions remain controlled and quiet. The inmate stays restrained. Officers maintain conversation only as necessary. Communication with dispatch centers continues throughout the drive, another standard element of high-security transport procedures. The goal remains consistency. No surprises, no deviations, no unnecessary stops. As the convoy approaches the Federal Correctional Complex in Florence, the environment shifts. Several facilities appear in sequence: FCI Florence, medium security; USP Florence, high security; and a minimum security camp. These units sit together, forming a cluster of institutions housing different levels of custody. But ADX Florence is separate. Positioned on its own ridge and surrounded by multiple layers of fencing, concrete, and razor wire, the Supermax stands apart both physically and symbolically. Journalists have described its silhouette as stark, angular, and intentionally isolated, a structure built purely for function, not aesthetics. For the inmate inside the van, only glimpses of the high desert landscape and the rising structure are visible, but each mile reinforces that the journey is nearing its end. After hours of movement across air and land, the convoy finally approaches the main gate of ADX Florence, where the most secure phase of the entire operation begins: entry into the Supermax's Sally Port system. Reaching the outer grounds of ADX Florence does not mean the journey is over. In many ways, this is where the most meticulous security procedures begin. Every step that follows is engineered to ensure total control, prevent confusion, and eliminate any chance of unauthorized movement. No one enters ADX casually, not even the officers escorting the inmate. The first barrier is the Sally Port, a double-gated entry system used in maximum security prisons to secure vehicle transfers. At ADX, this system is built with precision. The outer gate opens only after identification checks are completed. Once the transport van pulls inside, the gate closes behind it, locking the vehicle in a sealed space. Cameras monitor the area from multiple angles, capturing every movement. Only when the outer gate is fully secured does the inner gate open, allowing access into the facility. This sequence prevents any simultaneous opening of both gates, a critical feature in high-security design. Inside the Sally Port, the unloading process begins. Officers exit the vehicle first, creating a controlled perimeter around the inmate. The inmate remains fully restrained. When officers are ready, they open the van doors and escort the inmate out using a multi-person formation that has been refined through decades of BOP transport protocol. Nothing about this choreography is improvised. It exists to ensure that the inmate cannot move unpredictably and that officers maintain clear lines of sight at all times. Once inside the reception corridor, the first of several procedures begins: identity verification. Staff confirm the inmate's identity through fingerprint checks, photographs, and a detailed review of paperwork. These steps are designed to eliminate even the slightest chance of misidentification, a non-negotiable requirement in a facility that houses some of the most closely monitored inmates in the country. Next comes the initial medical and psychological screening. Federal standards require that all incoming inmates be evaluated upon arrival. Medical staff check for injuries sustained during transport, assess immediate physical conditions, and record any urgent psychological concerns. These examinations have been referenced in Inspector General reviews and lawsuits involving federal intake procedures. The goal is to ensure that the inmate enters the facility in stable condition and that any pressing needs are documented before placement. The intake team then begins the property inventory. ADX has strict regulations regarding what inmates are allowed to possess. Staff log legal papers, identification documents, approved personal items, clothing, and medically necessary materials. Items that do not comply with ADX standards are either stored or mailed out. Every object is recorded, ensuring complete accountability. Following property intake, the inmate undergoes decontamination and clothing exchange, a standard procedure across maximum security institutions. They shower under supervision, change into ADX-issued uniform clothing, and have all transport restraints removed. A full-body search documents any existing marks or injuries. Information kept for medical and security records. The orientation phase begins next, though it is very different from the group-based orientation seen at lower security facilities. At ADX, movement is tightly restricted and always supervised by multiple officers. Orientation consists of briefings on rules of confinement, communication policies, property limits, recreation procedures, sanctions, and day-to-day expectations. Some information is delivered through written materials. Other parts are communicated verbally in controlled settings. There is no communal orientation unit. Everything is done individually. By the time these steps are completed, the inmate has passed through several layers of verification, screening, and security checks. Each step is methodical. Each part is intentional. And each one reinforces the core function of ADX Florence, a facility designed to house individuals whose management requires the highest possible level of control. The next stage is where the reality of the Supermax becomes tangible. The first hours inside an ADX cell. The first 24 hours inside ADX. 3,000 characters. The first day inside ADX Florence is unlike intake at any other federal facility. Even after the transport teams have departed, the Sallyport gates have closed, and the paperwork is complete, the inmate has only reached the beginning of a tightly controlled environment built around isolation, monitoring, and absolute security. Every minute of the first 24 hours is shaped by procedures refined over decades. After orientation, most inmates are placed in a temporary holding cell. These cells are not designed for comfort. They are built for short stays and strict observation. The inmate remains under constant supervision, with minimal or no access to personal property. Staff observe behavior, document any signs of agitation or distress, and prepare for the inmate's eventual placement in a long-term unit. The holding cell stage can last a few hours or into the night, depending on staffing, space availability, and security considerations. Once the initial observation period is complete, the decision is made about where the inmate will be housed. ADX has several types of units. General population ranges, still solitary. Control units with increased restrictions, and in rare cases, special administrative measures, SAMs, units for individuals whose communication must be strictly limited. Specific placements are rarely public unless referenced in court filings, but the factors influencing the decision include psychological assessments, behavior during transport, threat level, and available cell space. When the inmate finally enters their first ADX cell, the environment communicates the Supermax philosophy immediately. Journalists, lawsuits, and former staff have consistently documented the core features. Concrete walls, floor, and ceiling designed to eliminate breakable materials. A poured concrete bed with a thin mattress. A built-in desk and stool, part of the room's structure. A stainless steel toilet sink unit, bolted securely to the wall. A shower inside the cell, so the inmate does not need to be escorted daily. A narrow window angled toward the sky, allowing natural light but no view of the outer grounds. The window design is intentional. It prevents inmates from determining the layout of the exterior facility or tracking movements around it. This feature has been widely reported and is one of the most recognizable elements of ADX architecture. During the first 24 hours, meals are delivered through a secure food slot. The inmate does not leave the cell. Staff limit verbal interaction, keeping communication functional but minimal. These practices are described in numerous lawsuits and media investigations into life inside the Supermax. Throughout the day, mental health and medical staff continue evaluations. Under BOP policy, incoming inmates must be assessed within a defined intake period. Staff look for signs of withdrawal, anxiety, aggression, or self-harm risk. New arrivals may react differently to the silence and isolation. Some remain calm, others pace their cells, and some exhibit visible signs of stress. Every reaction is documented. One of the defining features of the first day is the overwhelming quiet. There are no crowds, no group movement, and no shared spaces. Sound echoes through the concrete, but voices are scarce. In many cases, the inmate sees no one except the officers performing routine checks. ADX was designed this way. Its architecture emphasizes control, separation, and predictability. As the first 24 hours close, the reality becomes clear. Daily life inside ADX is governed by order, routine, and isolation. The systems surrounding the inmate are not temporary. They're the foundation of the Supermax's control model. Each step, from property limits to movement restrictions, reflects a facility built to manage individuals considered too dangerous, too influential, or too unpredictable for any other prison in the federal system. The journey is over, but the confinement has just begun. The journey to ADX Florence is unlike any other transfer in the federal system. Quiet, controlled, and built around absolute security from start to finish. From the secret approval process to the final steps inside a concrete cell, every part of the move reflects how seriously the government treats inmates considered too dangerous or disruptive for any other prison. If you found this breakdown helpful and want more fact-driven documentaries about the U.S. prison system, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next documentary.